I was 10 years old, lived in the deep south. Me and my parents lived in the woods, in a little house a couple of miles from the tiny little town where I grew up. To get to our house, you turned down a paved road, travelled approximately a mile, and we lived in the woods down a short dirt road to the left. There were other homes sort of nearby, but woods separated all of us, so there was a lot of privacy. It was summer. I was bored, because until I learned to drive, my summers were incredibly boring. My mum was not sociable, so I only had company or was visited rarely, and we went to church and we went shopping once a week in the nearest major city. But other than that, me and my mum just stayed home alone. In this little town, most people didn't even lock their doors. It was, and still is, probably one of the safest towns in America. So in the summer, my parents were too cheap to have air conditioning. We would have the doors and windows open, nothing locked, never dreaming that our safety could be threatened. One day my uncle, my dad's brother, his wife and 3 kids showed up. His kids were in my age range, and I was ecstatic. My mum never looked forward to these visits. She was just not sociable, and our house was tiny. The kids had to camp out in the living room. She knew my uncle was coming, but he wasn't due for another couple of weeks. But for some reason, he decided to come early. It was a summer's evening. Me and my 3 cousins were out running around the yard, playing like little kids do, when my cousins got into arguing. My uncle was in the living room. He then called them in and made them sit down for a while, until they could learn to behave. I stayed outside and practiced cartwheels, something I was desperately trying to learn before school started back. I noticed that this big guy came walking into the yard. I didn't really look at him in the face. I can tell you that he was tall, a bit chubby and muscular, and wearing a t-shirt. He was carrying a limb. I don't know what kind it was. In the stories we told later about it, we referred to it as a big stick, but it looked like it had been kind of smoothed some kind of way, and at the end of it was flexible like a whip. I don't know why he carried it. Maybe to hit dogs if they tried to attack while he was walking. Who knows? He walked by me, and I stopped what I was doing, and was curiously staring. Nobody visited much, as they usually drove up in the yard, and yeah, it was usually family. He walked up onto our porch and knocked on our screen door. My mother came to the door, and he told her that he was lost. He said he was staying with some people, and he wasn't from here, and he went to the store with them, and they just drove off, and left him alone, and he didn't know how to get back to their house. My mum, this is her idea, I'm not sure why. She told him that she would call this lady that lived down the road from us, and ask her if her teenage sons would drive down and pick him up and get him back to where he was staying. My mum left him standing on the porch and walked away to make the phone call, and he did something that I thought was a little strange. He opened the screen door and stuck his head in, looking around. Of course he saw my uncle, who was like the big strong stock guy in the living room. My mum called this lady, her boys drove up and got him pretty quickly, and he was gone. We didn't think much of it, until my uncle finally left, because we were too busy and I was having fun. But after my uncle's family left, at the end of that week, we found out some things. First of all, we found out that this guy wasn't lost at all. A relative that lived at the end of the road, where you turn off to head towards our house, said that he saw this guy walk past his house for the last 2 or 3 days in a row. He was carrying that big limb or stick, whatever you want to call it. He said he would stay down towards our house for a while, and then he would walk by again. Then the lady, whose son gave the guy a ride, she called my mum a few days later after this happened, and she said he told her sons exactly how to get where he was staying. She also told my mum that me and her needed to stay in the house and keep the doors locked, because this young man was up to no good. I believe he had been watching and saw a petite woman and a little girl home alone all day, with all the doors unlocked, and unassuming of danger. Anyway, creepy guy who came into our yard that day. Let's never meet again. So, a little context here. I'm currently a 23-year-old, and I have moved out of my hometown. But this took place during the winter of my sophomore year of high school. I had grown up shy and pretty nerdy in a little town in Oregon. I won't give away the name of the place for privacy's sake. And I spent most of my time in the water, whether it had been swim team or water polo. It made me a pretty lean, mean short machine, me being only a 5'3" girl. The only thing I loved more than swimming and being in the water was choir. The only thing I hated about choir was Sam. He was a tenor who stood behind me and constantly berated my singing voice, mocking it like it was a dying parrot. Now, I may not have the best voice in the world, but at least I tried. Not only that, but he and his friends liked to pick on me while I was in the hall, making squawking noises whenever I walked past. Our choir director tried to ignore it, but it was hard to stick up for the nerdy soprano. Since I was prone to teasing and mocking, I had a pretty limited number of people who I could hang out with. One of those people being my friend Katie. Now, Katie was definitely not someone who you'd consider to be popular. She was overweight, smelled like fish all the time, and wore the most eccentric outfits you could possibly imagine, from tutus to top hats and holy high-top Converse. I secretly admired her for her lack of giving fucks, but I never really told her because I thought maybe I could someday rise to the ranks of the popular girls. Of course, when she invited me to her birthday party, I didn't say no because it was a costume party. I showed up in my Halloween best, beaming because I knew that I would outshine everyone at the party. This came back to bite me in the arse. There was a guy there named Scott. He was the year ahead of us, creepy as all sin, with long, greasy black hair and skin that had never seen a lick of UV ray. Since he was the only guy at the party, most of the girls ran away giggling and screaming as he chased them around and rented a pool hall. I stood by the concessions and rolled my eyes at their antics, my party mood going quickly south. It came to Scott's attention that I wasn't joining in on their party antics, so he came over and stood uncomfortably close to me. "Hey," he greeted me, his lip curled over his yellow teeth. "Are you having a good time?" "Yeah, sure," I squeaked out. Regardless of whether Scott was weird looking, I rarely had guys talk to me, let alone guys in another grade. He arched his eyebrow. "You're Hannah, right? Katie's told me all about you. You don't have a boyfriend?" I shook my head, dreading where this conversation was going. "Nope, I'm too busy," I said, making excuses. That's when a cold, clammy hand slithered around my waist, and he tried to pull me into his concave chest. "I could be your boyfriend," he practically whispered into my ear. I couldn't get myself away fast enough. I quickly excused myself from the party, walking outside to fumble with my car keys. I was a new driver, and my mum had warned me about driving on icy roads, but I didn't care. I just wanted to sit in my car. The place where Scott had put his hand was damp, and I shivered as I slid into my driver's seat and cranked on the heat. I texted a quick message to Katie telling her that I wasn't feeling well and peeled out of the parking lot. A couple of weeks went by after our encounter, and I did notice I started to see Scott a lot more than I usually did, whether it be just outside of my classrooms as I left, or sitting on a table where he didn't normally reside. I tried to brush off his creepy gestures and his semi-stalking tendencies as a mere coincidence, until one day. Katie stopped me in the hallway at the end of the day. "Scott likes you," she said. The face I made apparently did nothing to deter her words. "He wants to be your boyfriend." "I don't want or need a boyfriend," I replied, slamming my locker and dreading the throng of students as they walked towards their respected modes of transportation. "Look, he seems like a nice guy, but I'm just not interested." "Come on, Hannah, he's super into you," she pleaded, Plus then, I could live vicariously through you. No thanks. I waved her off nonchalantly as we stepped out of the double doors. Me ignoring the squawking noises that followed me out. Our school parking lot was built out of 3 different lots. One across from the school, reserved for those who had big, loud diesel trucks with Confederate flags hanging from their beds. One up the hill, and one down by the baseball and football fields. These were seldom populated, since the fastest way to get to them was through the woods behind our school, frequently used by the potheads. I knew beggars couldn't be choosers, so I opted to usually go down into the field, following the path down towards the lower lot. I had just entered the woods, when I felt someone's gaze on the back of my head, making the hair on the back of my neck stand up. I turned around slowly to see Scott walking down the path, hands shoved deep into his pockets of his black jean jacket. My heart leapt into my throat as I turned on my heel and began walking quickly down the hill towards my car, trying to keep from looking back. "Where you going, baby?" His voice oozed through my brain, like a frog crushed with a brick as I quickly leapt into a sprint. However, with my swimming bag and my book bag, I couldn't make it very far until Scott had his hand around my scrawny wrist in like a vice grip. "You're gonna play hard to get, aren't you?" "Let me go," I practically screamed. He merely smiled and practically caressed the side of my cheek. I resisted the urge to vomit in his face. "Nah, baby, I'm done with the games, come on. So, can I be your boyfriend? You're so pretty," he said as I closed my eyes and prayed to God that I wasn't going to be raped. That's when my salvation came, in the form of an asshole sent from the heavens. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Instantly, Scott's hands were off mine, and I stumbled backwards. My deer in the headlights expression plastered firmly on my face. "Listen man, my girlfriend was just getting a little playful, I didn't mean anything by it." I flicked my gaze towards my hero, and to my horror, I saw Sam standing there, his own eyes full of hatred and disgust. "No fucking way, I've seen you follow her to her classes, and sitting with her at lunch. She wants nothing to do with you, now get the fuck out of here before I kick your ass." Scott didn't need to be told twice, practically jumping back like he'd been struck with lightning, pushing past Sam, and I head back to the school. Sam watched him leave before turning to me. "You alright?" "Yeah, just a little flustered," I admitted. "Thanks for that." He shrugged, and a small smile crept over his face. "Yeah, of course. We have to watch out for each other, don't we? We're practically family." I scoffed. "Family? You make fun of my singing?" He chuckled. "I only make fun of you because I know you can take it. Now come on, I'll walk you back to your car." From that day forward, Sam and I turned over a new leaf. We tried dating at one point. At the end of the day, we found out that we were just too incompatible to be lovers, so we went our separate ways. However, I do still keep in touch with Sam, since he stayed in our hometown, and he keeps me updated on the local gossip. Scott was recently arrested, for what, I'm not sure, but in the long run, I hope he gets the help he desperately needed. If Sam hadn't been there that day, I could have been raped or even worse. So thank you to the boy I hated for being my guardian angel. So Scott, let's not meet again. I'm a 25-year-old female, and I've been living with my boyfriend for the last 6 years. This was about 4 years ago. I was online a lot, and still am, and met a lot of cool people. Many had rough backstories, but I always offered a listening ear and tried to support them. I'm going to mention that I have autism, and I can be pretty naive, so I don't recognise certain bad situations right away. I met a 24-year-old guy from Australia, I'm from Europe, who had just broken up with his girlfriend, that he said was emotionally unstable, and it ended with her wanting to kill herself, and him not being able to handle it anymore. I talked to him about it a lot, and tried to help him cope with the situation. We started to game together online, and I started to see him as a friend. But after a while, I started to notice that he was kind of acting like I was his girlfriend. I glanced over it because he knew I had a boyfriend, and it might have just been kindness and I mistook it. I'm famous for being oblivious to that kind of stuff. He started to tell me that I should break up with my boyfriend, going on long tangents and writing me emails how my boyfriend was like his ex, that he abused me mentally and physically, that he was raping me, was making my life a living hell, and that he was going to kill me one day. Which was all completely absurd, and I kept explaining that to him. After a while, it was obvious that he indeed thought of me as his new girlfriend. He made it clear that we were going to spend the rest of our lives together, and that he would make sure of it. He was convinced that me telling him to stop and to leave me alone was all orchestrated by my boyfriend, and I was actually being held hostage. Luckily, he didn't know my full name, or so I thought, or where I lived. I started getting messages from random accounts, with pictures of people bloodied up, saying, "This is going to happen," all with his name on the pages itself. This went on for a while. I begged him to stop, but he kept pushing. I had blocked him, but he kept messaging me, making new accounts to get in contact. I decided to just delete my account on that site altogether, and not to go there anymore, and hoped that it would all just go away. But then, I suddenly started to get messages on Facebook. I never told him my full name, and even then, I made sure my Facebook is extremely private, with a family nickname, and I only had other family members on there, because most live far away. My boyfriend didn't even have a Facebook account, and like I said before, I kept my full name and location to myself. He made about 150 pages and profiles, and completely directed to me, with pictures of people killing themselves, telling me he was going to kill himself, complete with the overlays and banners of "This is your fault." It seemed like he made it his full-time day job to send me messages on different platforms. He even found stuff out like my YouTube account and followed me around there. Eventually, he started sending receipts of school books that he had sold of his current school year, and later, one plane ticket to an airport where I actually live close to, and 2 back to Australia. He kept sending proof, like of him moving out of his apartment and putting his stuff in storage. He told me he was coming to save me from my boyfriend, who had kept me hostage, and that he was going to kill him and take me back to Australia so I could be saved. He had gotten rid of all the ties he had, quit school, quit his job, so we could have a blank slate, telling me we would have to live under the radar for a while. All the while he kept sending pictures of proof of doing these things because he loved me and he wanted to show it. By now, I had blocked every Facebook account with his, unfortunately, extremely common name, and basically deleted every other account I had online. Even though a lot were under different names, he found me everywhere. Eventually the day came where he was taking pictures at the airport, which he was posting on my Facebook wall, and him in the plane, which logos I immediately recognised as my country's official airline. He began talking about the actual house I lived in, which was a kind of strange place to live. I lived on an industrial area in a maintenance apartment inside a huge empty building with only one other office. I was on the lease as maintenance person, but that was purely for legal reasons, because the owner thought he could make some money on the side. The whole building was open to me, and there weren't any people living remotely nearby. He definitely couldn't have known that I lived there. He started messaging me about how perfect the whole setup was for his plans. My boyfriend was aware of everything that had happened by then, and thought it was best if maybe we had sought out the help of police to give us some advice. But of course they couldn't do anything, and suggested that if we really were scared, we would be better to just go somewhere else, and we decided to go and stay at my parents'. We went back the next day, since we had both school and work, but saw police cars in the front of the building. The owner informed us that someone had broken in. This person had tried to go into the office next to our apartment, and they had an alarm system that had went off and alerted the cops. At this point, I wanted to know what the hell was going on, and if he had tried to break in, since that was our first guest. It wasn't hard contacting him, since he had already sent me multiple messages again on Facebook from several different accounts. My boyfriend contacted him, and the guy agreed to have a webcam chat, and when we turned on his cam, I immediately recognised a hallmark of our city from the window behind him. I silently freaked out, not letting him know I was present. My boyfriend then spent the next 7 hours talking to him. The guy was furious, and still certain my boyfriend was going to kill me, with nothing that could change his mind. After more than 7 hours with my normally monk-calm boyfriend getting pretty annoyed at this point because of the stupid reasoning the guy was saying, he was disgusted and started to throw out profanities towards me and him, basically saying that I was so adamant on staying with him, I deserved what my boyfriend was going to do to me, and he wouldn't mourn me, because I had ruined his, my own, our kids, and our life together. I only heard from him one more time after that, a short video of him being in the hospital saying he had tried to kill himself, and that it was my fault, and I was going to bring darkness over the earth, instead of light. Like he promised, he said stuff like that often, and other weird spiritual promises he said I made. I got scared again for a while, but it got silent after that. Even though it was years ago, I'm still afraid this guy isn't over me, and will come after me, but as far as I know, his parents had him locked in a nursing home for the mentally ill. I got this info a year later, when his older brother finally responded to my Facebook messages telling him to speak to me about his brother, because he was not okay. Anyway, crazy guy, let's never meet. When I was about 13, my parents and I moved to an old house. It was at least 90 years old. It was large, and it was in pretty good condition for a house that old. I was an only child. I got the second biggest room on the second floor, and that room was huge. Sometimes my parents left me at home by myself for a few hours. Whether they were going shopping or on a date, I always asked to stay at home. I didn't mind staying at home, because I like to think of myself as responsible and trustworthy. It made me feel special. One night at around 6 PM or so, my parents had to go run some errands. They were the kind of people who spent long hours out shopping for the best deals, and they used a lot of coupons on whatever they could, and I didn't want to be involved in all that, so I decided not to come. I stayed in my room and watched some TV. Then at around 8 PM, I got hungry and decided to get a snack. Now at this point, the house is very dark, so I grab my cell phone and use it as the best I can to light up the hallway, since the hallway didn't have a light. Now this was before cell phones had built-in flashlights, so I just used all the light my screen could give until I made it to the kitchen. The kitchen light had been left on by my parents. I put my phone on the counter. As I was walking to the pantry, I saw a man hunched down in the corner by the back door. He was wearing black and red clothing, and he had long, greasy, unkempt hair. I didn't see his face because his head was facing the wall. He was holding a large knife. He didn't notice that I had spotted him. I wanted to scream, but I had my hand over my mouth and walked back upstairs, leaving my cell phone down there. I was not walking over to get it. We didn't have any phones upstairs, so I walked into my room, locked the door, and hid in my closet. I started crying silently, and started to think of the worst. He was going to find me and kill me, I just knew it. Then I heard someone coming upstairs, heavy footsteps. I felt sick, and I had never been so afraid in my life. Then I heard someone open the door to my parents' room, which was 2 rooms away from mine. I then hear sirens outside, and I hear the door being knocked on. I breathe a sigh of relief. I hear the man running back down the stairs quickly, and he's trying to open our back door. Then I hear our front door being pushed down, and I hear footsteps of 2 people coming upstairs, and they start searching our home. The police come to my room and let me know it's safe. I open the door. I later found out that our neighbours saw this man unlocking our back door with a key, and saw that he had a knife and called the police. My parents arrived a few minutes later, and my mum started hugging me and crying. The man unfortunately escaped, and I cried and got no sleep that night. Because the man had a key, we had to change the lock, but we eventually moved way out of state. I'm 23 now, I have moved past it, but there are several questions I still have. How did he get a key? Why did he want to come to our house? And what would he have done if the police showed up any later than they did? A year or so ago, I found myself, alongside my now fiancée, the victim of the horror stories I love so much. I've been a fan of horror stories since I was a kid, but after the events I'll mention below, it took me a while to enjoy them again. Back in 2015, my boyfriend of 3 years and I broke up. I essentially had mental health issues I was struggling to accept whilst we were together, so we took some time apart. During the few months, I modelled, some bog standard modelling, and some of the nude variety. I even had a Tumblr for behind the scenes activities that I'm not proud of now that's gone. I got paid well, so I thought nothing of it, until I got contacted by some fans. These fans were creepy to the point that they bombarded me with comments about wanting to have sex with me, by force if necessary. This continued for a while, until my ex, scared these guys might figure out my personal information about me, white knighted me to defend me from their pursuits. Big mistake. To protect me from their virtual threats and comments that I was brushing off as nothing, since hell, it was Tumblr. He used his personal account, the account that had his real name, my real name, pictures of us, and the city we lived in. He hadn't used it in years, so he didn't remember any of this being on his profile. We never knew it would cause so much shit. But like the creeps they were, my fans tried to use this information to meet up with me. When I refused, it all took a turn, with messages and Snapchats, alongside spam on other platforms. I just started to ignore them, hoping it would calm down. My ex received a lot of the usual death threats that ensue with white knighting on Tumblr, and we were both starting to get our lives in better places. Until I got a message that scared me to the bone. The message contained the name of where my ex works. He hadn't worked there long at this point, maybe a month or so, but he didn't broadcast his job. Only friends and family knew he had it, and apparently so did my fans. When I tried to make it seem like I knew nothing, to prevent any further threats, they responded with, "We could just wait around for him until he finishes his shift," before sending me a picture of his work location. "Will you meet us now?" they said. I pleaded and begged for them to leave him be, scared they would actually do something, for them to leave him alone. I thought it might have worked, but they never responded. After making sure my ex was okay, I tried to calm down for a few days. Then came the next photo message. The bus stop my ex used to get home from in the centre of our city. I contacted him to find out where he was, and luckily he was on his way home a few minutes prior to that photo. I assumed that they wouldn't know where to go, even if they had got the bus, and decided to leave it at that. I didn't want to scare my ex. I still loved him. I didn't want him endangered because of my stupid, naive actions. He was probably suspicious at that point, but he never said a word to me about it. A day or so later, I received a new photo message. They were on the road near his house. That made me lose it. I text my ex, got him to lock his doors and windows. He wasn't the only one home. He lived with his family at this point, the people I used to live with, who I lived with for 2 years prior to our breakup. Not knowing at this point how they got the information, we were both honestly scared for our lives. That night, I got an unexpected Skype call from my ex. He explained to me how he had had enough, how they had told him they'd hacked his phone and my laptop to track us, and how if he didn't end his life, how they would reveal my family, my friends, and my private life. He apologised as he started swallowing a bunch of pills, before apologising to me for everything and hanging up. I freaked out. No one expects that. I truly believed my ex had gone to kill himself, until I received a text from his old phone, a number he hadn't used in years. He told me how he was okay, and how we had to fake his death to keep them away. I played along, even to the point of messaging these fans, telling them how I was going to the police, and how I was going to track them down. How they killed my baby's father. I told them I was pregnant to see if that would get them to calm down, to no avail. They apologised for my loss, and appeared to disappear after that. Until the end of last year, my ex and I, after this disaster, got back together, since we both knew living without each other wasn't an option. We got engaged and started looking for places to live, usual adult decisions. One day in October, I got a message on my personal Instagram.
"We're still watching."
Since that point, I've made sure we've been careful about what we post. We've changed devices and got rid of our webcams. To my fans, if you ever see this, let's never meet.